Yeah, it's fine. We'll fix it. It looks like you're on stilts. All right. Well, good evening, everyone. I hope you're having a great week or just finished up a great weekend. Maybe is the better way to think about it. As usual, tonight I am joined by Mr. Capozzi and Mrs. Dr. Schiewer. Is that, do you say Mrs. Doctor?
Just Doctor.
Dr. Mrs. Just Doctor.
Just Doctor.
We don't need to talk about relationship status.
Nope.
So as usual, feel free to throw whatever questions you have in our chat. We'd love to answer those, address those, think about those, ponder them with you. But we just ask that you're kind, generous, and merciful in that chat so everyone feels safe to ask the questions that they have. And we'll do the best to avoid the difficult questions and really drill down on the easy ones. That's the MO, right?
Amen.
So, what are you drinking tonight, Capozzi?
Same as last time. I'm going cheap. Bullet.
I'm
yeah,
drinking,
you got the good stuff.
This is Widow Jane. It was a gift from one of our listeners, one of our viewers. So,
what?
Listen up, viewers. This is the type of stuff you can buy us off. We'll answer any deconstruction question you have.
Wow. You get gifted this stuff. I never get gifted bourbon or whiskey.
Wait. Yeah, but what are you talking into right now?
Yeah, yes, I know. I'm not complaining about gifts that I do get. It's just, let's spread all the wealth.
And poor Tana, her sole gift is me. What gift.
What is the return or exchange policy?
Ooh.
That ship has sailed. Look, almost 27 years of marriage. I'm pretty sure there is no return policy. They do not want these goods. These goods no longer represent the goods that were purchased at all.
That's
too much wear and tear.
So how was everyone's week? How are you guys?
Delightful. We're just doing great over here. I'd be, I will say I'm tired.
Yeah.
Yeah. Monday tired,
Sorry.
Like that, it's good. It's not bad. It's a Monday tired thing. It's just like it feels like Monday.
Right.
And I'm ready for it to be Friday.
That's fair.
Yeah. How about you, Tana?
I'm trying to remember what my week was like. Mixture of things, some good, some bad. I am now in a third interview process for a job. So,
ooh,
yeah. So 3
That's
different
exciting.
social justice organizations, and a friend added me to her project for something, so I helped her with that. So that was a nice. Little thing to throw my way. And then I talked to an ex-coworker this morning and probably have a gig with her too. So things are hopefully looking up in the employment department.
Yes. Love it.
Yeah. As much as I would just love to spend all my time editing podcasts and making social posts.
It's not all that it looks. It's not as exciting as it looks.
It's really not.
No. Don, how about you? How are you?
That's a mixed bag. I think Amanda said it best.
Meh.
Yeah. I'm all right. It's kind of a weird season. I despise February, like as a season, because February in Toledo is its own season. It
That's
really
fair.
is. You have October and November are kind of cool, not terrible. December, January are cold, and then February is fuck. So I
March
don't.
is that for us?
March, is that for you? March
Yeah.
is usually like decent with a smattering of unexpected snowfall.
Smattering.
I don't care. It's my birthday in March, so.
It is
Mine
her
too.
birthday in March.
Mine too.
Oh, really? What day?
The 12th.
Mine is the 7th.
6th.
7th is good too. The 7th is good too. Wait.
It's the 6th.
Are you March?
Don't let her lie to you.
It's the 7th.
What?
Oh, yeah. The Orchid Festival is coming up at the zoo. Oh, and we went this past weekend. We went to our friend's cafe that he opened last April, and that was delicious. Oh, where did he go?
He just left. He also does not like February, and it was getting close. There you are.
My birthday.
Look, if you want to kick me out, just tell me.
Oh, okay. You know what I did this weekend? I did the millennial thing and ordered avocado toast.
Ooh.
It was my most millennial
Yeah,
moment.
it was
It's
very
delicious,
strange.
though.
While she was eating it, I watched the economy plunge. Like the housing market dropped. Banking dropped. I mean, it was amazing. Like, and people started eating Tide Pods.
Dogs and
Strangest
cats living
things.
together.
From one bite of avocado toast.
Well, I mean, I think we all can agree avocado toast has been the destruction of all modernity.
Yep.
I've been saying that for at least 2 decades.
Oh, sure you have. Like, don't try and play it off like you're some great visionary now.
He can't be a great visionary. Andrew Tate is the only true great visionary.
Truth.
He has perspicacity.
I love that word so much.
He has what?
He uses
Perspicacity.
this word, perspicacity, and like
No,
so many of
I
his
think he just
materials.
means he carries a large purse, and so he has a lot of purse capacity.
He has purse capacity.
I think that's what he's saying. I think that's what everyone should hashtag for him, because I think that would upset his dainty.
That would upset him, yeah.
His dainty
That's a
self.
great
Yes.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
Purse capacity. It's good.
So anyway.
So I'm glad we got that off our chest.
Yeah, I needed that.
So what have you guys been thinking about?
I'm going to toss this to Dave because he was mentioning things he was thinking about earlier.
What did I say? I did say something, didn't I?
I don't
You know, friends, I'll tell you what I've been thinking about, because I just made a TikTok about it. And it's about the difference between evangelicalism, specifically white evangelicalism, and liberation theology. And I feel like the two belong in very different worlds. Like, I learned about liberation theology in seminary because I went to a seminary that was designed for urban ministers. While it was Gordon Conwell, it wasn't the Gordon Conwell that Billy Graham started. It was a, offshoot in Roxbury, which is like a economically under-resourced part of Boston.
Isn't that where the club is?
The club?
The Roxbury? Don't you guys remember that skit?
Oh, the night at the Roxbury.
Oh,
Yeah. Wow. I'm slow on some of these things. It is
That's an
not,
old
but that would have been
reference.
awesome. That would have been awesome. What you So what I really, really think is that they don't belong in the same religion. I think they're two different religions. They use the same
Evangelicalism and liberation theology, or liberation Christianity.
Yeah, they're different religions. One is a hyper focus on belief. That's faith. Faith is belief. The other one, faith is participation. Don is old. That is true. And within evangelicalism, there can be movements, denominations, even that are that focus a little bit more on participation in the work of the kingdom. But by and large, evangelicalism is a movement that is inspired, the offspring of, whatever you want to call, imperial Christianity. And I think liberation theology is a response to imperial Christianity, using the texts that evangelical Christianity has discarded as because it's an affront to imperial power. So I've just been thinking about the difference between them and how it is that, especially within, and I saw this on the comments that came on the post that I made, that people are they've never heard of liberation theology. And their instant, like the people that were against it, their instant reaction was, yeah, but they're still against LGBTQ people and, F them kind of thing. I'm like, sheesh. Well, if you don't know what it is, then don't assume anything. It also, right. So, and also, like, I get it. You're hurt by the church. I get it. And people hate religion because they've been hurt by it. And at the same time, I'm unwilling to be that antagonistic, especially when the majority of people that embrace liberation theology are black and Latinx folks, who have been the victims of imperial Christianity.
Yeah.
So that's what's been on my mind.
I don't know that you can say that liberation theology is anti-LGBTQ. It's just not addressed in liberation theology.
Completely.
I mean, it's individuals who hold a liberation theology view might be, but liberation theology in and of itself, or theory even, just is not. So, Dave, maybe you would be willing to kind of give us a quick overview. Like, how would you define liberation theology?
How would I define it? Liberation, from my perspective, and I got this definition from two people. I read James Cone in seminary. James Cone is a black liberation theologian, and I studied it under
the
Eldon
father
Villafane.
Of black liberation theology.
Yeah, and I studied it under Eldon Villafane, who's my professor. He was a Latinx liberation theologian, and it's like someone that had a profound impact on me. And the way that I understand it is that the Jesus movement is inherently a liberation movement, not for the afterlife, but for the now. And so his movement is about confronting the powers that be in a way that sets people free. And it can happen even if people's physical status remains sort of under the oppression of worldly powers, but the goal is to set people free, to remove oppression. And so liberation theology is an invitation into the work that Jesus and the Hebrew prophets were doing, which was a very real setting people free on this planet. So that's just generally overview the way that I would say liberation theology sets itself as a distinctive among Christian theological perspectives. Do you agree or disagree?
I have some thoughts. I mean, I agreed with everything you said, but I think I want to ask Tana, is there a liberation theory in other genres of, like, for like literature, as ways of reading literature? Is that something that's kind of unique, maybe not exclusive, but relatively unique to theology?
I'm sure there is. I don't know, because I didn't really study literature that much. I was more doing rhetoric and writing, and at the university I went to for my master's, where I did have the literature part, they were very, very focused on the kind of white guy canon, unfortunately.
So Dizzy, you asked what is imperial Christianity. I'm going to give it a shot, and Dave has used this more often than I have, and I love this term. But imperial Christianity is kind of the Christianity that most Western Christians know. in the sense that it is the Christianity that is supports and upholds empire or oppressive systems, as opposed to what Dave was talking about with liberation theology, which tends to undercut those and dismantle them, or attempt to. So imperial Christianity in a lot of ways is the exact opposite of liberation theology. And that's not completely I guess it's just not complete. So as far as your definition of liberation theology, I don't know that there's anything I would add to that definition, as much as I would say that I think it is so much closer to what Jesus was thinking and experiencing, right? It's not another layer placed on top to decipher it for today or for a people group. It actually is kind of that thing that kind of clears away some of the muck that is on top of it from years of imperial Christian teaching. And liberation theology kind of comes along with the squeegee and scrapes all that stuff off. And then we kind of get to see a little bit more, in my opinion, because when I read particularly ancient rabbinic traditions, ancient rabbis, sages, etc., almost all of them, I think, could just fit perfectly within Cohn. I'm drawing a blank on some of the other folks' names, but that his stuff, the rabbi's stuff from then, because their whole focus was survival, right? Like when you think about the Canaanites, the Babylonians, the Egyptians, now I realize Egypt is still a country, but the empire of Egyptians did not survive. It was kind of rebuilt geographically, right? But when you think about all these great empires that we see throughout history that didn't survive, and then you have this small little group that somehow survives. So not all. I'm reading a great book by, I want to say Christy Haynes. It might be Christina Haynes. And it's Introduction to the Bible. Ken Wilson, who wrote the book A Letter to My Congregation, recommended it. And that book is really fascinating because she says all these other empires had technology, they had power, they had people, they had all this stuff, and they didn't survive. Israel had an idea.
Yeah.
And it was such a profound idea that it survived all of these things. And I think that's a really interesting take. And I think that's kind of what liberation theology is as well. Liberation theology doesn't come from power. It doesn't come from control. It doesn't come from multitudes of people because it represents a marginalized group. But instead it comes and is powerful because of an idea. So powerful that it knocked Dave out.
It knocked Dave right out.
It knocked Dave right out. And again, he's just messing with us. He said he had to go early tonight, so I think he's just kind of slowly getting us used to the stream without him.
It's the old, I'm going through a tunnel trick.
I'm an idea that keeps coming back.
You're like a bad penny. So what do you guys think about that? That if instead of us thinking about Christendom as a religion, we thought of it instead as an idea, a concept, right? Does that feel different to you guys? Because it does to me. I'm not sure that I can fully articulate that why, but does that feel different at all for you guys?
Yeah, but I can't figure out how to articulate it any more than that.
What about you, Dave?
Yeah. Faith, in my understanding of faith, it is not about a belief system. It's about it's about trust. It's about allegiance. And so when you construct a system, you've made something into the opposite of faith, which is the inability, which is like sort of the purpose of a system is to create more and more of that, to replicate it. Faith is about abundance and growing and dismantling the things that are oppressive. And so what I would agree with everything that you said. And I think when it comes to, this is why I think they need to be separated from imperial Christianity, from Christendom, because liberation theology, you cannot reform imperial Christianity. I don't think that it's possible. I don't think it's reformable. It was attempted 500 years ago. It became a new version of imperial Christianity. People are now trying to reform it. They're new versions of imperial Christianity because it keeps getting replicated by dominant culture.
Yeah.
And I think what is different about liberation theology is it comes from the margins. And anything that comes from the margins is consistent with not only the Christian scriptures, but the Hebrew Bible, which is written by the loser, which we don't often have in history. We don't have a lot of pieces of literature that are written by the loser.
Especially honestly.
Right, exactly.
That's a really interesting point. I hadn't thought about before, which makes me wonder if it's also why it's that much easier for people in positions of power to read the Bible as like, because if we're consistently looking at history and like reading it through the eyes of the winner, I don't know, like I could just see people just applying that lens then. And I was thinking more about the idea versus religion thing, and I think for me, there's a little bit of calling it an idea feels almost like not heavy enough, but like there was a conversation between God and God's people and, whatever all of that wrapped up is. And then people made religions from it.
Yeah.
So like, I think that's how I would.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense.
Well, I think there's a desire to protect, right? To protect an idea. So if we have an idea and we want to protect it, there's lots of ways that we do that. And unfortunately, in a lot of ways, we smother the idea then because we're protecting it too much. So we're not talking about it because we don't want anyone to steal it. We're not giving it away because it has value to us that we want to keep for ourselves. And so I think that there's some things here with this idea that was just freely given away, that was free for people to access. One of the things that, again, this author, and we'll get it in the show notes here after the live stream, the book. But one of the other things she points out is that a lot of these other nations, they went about things, their traditions, their mythology, the story of the starting of the gods was, Tana, you're really loud. Their mythology around the gods was very violent, and the gods were always in war with each other and in war with the people. And Israel presented a God that gave the power to the people, right? And gave all of the creation of these rules and these ideas and the way to go about it to the people to figure out, outside of a couple things. And when you think about the grand scheme of things, like I was talking to someone, they're like, well, there's so many rules in the Bible. And I'm like, there's like a third number of rules in the Bible to what there is for getting a driver's license in the US. Brother. You have to learn like 3 times as many rules from the Bible, or I'm sorry, from getting a driver's test than there is in the Bible.
I have some. The other thing that like is really eating at me these days is the amount of people who will go on a litany of here's what the Bible supports that is deplorable. You know, they'll be like, it supports incest and slavery and blah, blah, blah. And you go down the list. I'm like, oh my God. Like, fine. Are we having a real conversation about the complexity and breadth and width of this library of books? Or are we talking about the things that you've internalized because you need to hate the thing that hurts you? That's fine if you do, but we have to be pinpoint accurate if we're going to critique the thing. So for me to say the Bible supports is a ridiculous starting statement, because if the Bible supports incest in one section, it decries it in another. If it supports slavery in one section, it decries it in another. If it supports oppression of women, it decries it in another. And I think this is where it sounds like there's a hurricane happening. Does anyone else hear that, by the way?
No, I don't.
No, it's just me. It for me is this the people who have been the most oppressed have given us a new way of looking at what it means to engage with the world, a new way that's more consistent with the scriptures than the thing that we've inherited. And I remember, church planting. Don, you were like, to me, if I hadn't met you when I did, I wouldn't have had the imagination that I did around church planting in evangelical churches. Now, it still didn't work.
Right.
It still wasn't going to work because I still needed to raise funds. I still needed to do all the capitalistic things that are associated with church planting. But remembering what it was that this movement was actually about in the first century is what liberation theology really is.
Absolutely. Any thoughts, Tana?
I had one earlier, but I would have had to interrupt, and now I can't remember what it was.
Well, I'll tell you what, if it comes back, just interrupt. All right?
Yeah.
We owe you one. All right, here's a question from Jezerick. What distortion do you feel is most embedded in modern mainline faith expression that stems from a false assumption of Scripture being written from a measure of success?
Can you read that again? Sorry.
Nope. Yes. Give me 1 second here.
Mainline.
What distortion do you feel is most embedded in modern mainline faith expression that stems from a false assumption of Scripture being written from a measure of success? I'd say it's something I've said here multiple times. It is so sneaky. It's so creative. It is the spiritualizing of the Bible and the de-physicality, the stripping it of its physicality.
Yeah.
That is the most egregious thing that's happened.
Yeah.
Right? Because the moment we make this about personal salvation and that being your spirit fluttering off to the nether, it gives you permission to abandon this earth. It gives you the escape pod. It allows you to ask, or it allows you to do things and be about things that are not about the here and now.
Yeah.
Instead, it's about the hereafter. And because of that, it's the greatest harm, in my opinion. I don't know. What do you guys think?
What do you got, Tana?
You said, can you repeat in a nutshell what you said was the main thing?
That I believe it is the taking the physicalness of the Hebrew faith, the Hebrew idea, if you will, and turning it into a spiritual thing.
Yeah. I fell down this wormhole of evangelical pastors this past weekend, and that was one of the it started because I saw a bunch of misogynistic BS, but that was one of the things I saw repeated the most of the pastors and the people following them was, you can't get saved by works. And it's like, they always kind of do this split where it's like, nope, it's not works, it's faith. And it's like one or the other, and they choose faith poorly. But the other thing that I thought was really interesting is that several people were like, the Bible doesn't contradict itself. And I was like, yeah, it does.
Well, here's what I would say. I don't know that I'm willing for the Bible to contradict itself because I don't really care that strongly about it. But I'd say I'm not sure it does. It tends to be contradicting if you take it literally and you assume it was written by God, then it's contradicting. If you look at this,
kind of mean.
Right. But I'm saying if you read it as it has 100 plus authors and they're all from different eras and they're all writing about their own experience and their own comprehension of who God is and what faith looks like lived out, I'm not sure that it's contradicting itself. I think maybe they're contradicting each other. Like maybe
it's a contradiction in terms.
Right.
Because it's not about contradiction. It's about just disagreement.
Evolution.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
And I wonder how a lot of those people meld that thought process with when they point to the verse they want to support whichever thing it is. And in the case of what I was reading this weekend, it was like women shouldn't preach, stuff like that.
Papa don't preach.
And then people be like, well, what do you do with this verse then? And they'd be like, basically like I ignore it. And and they put a lot of faith in Paul. It's all about Paul, but
all about Paul.
It's all about that Paul, about that apostle.
I just think there's a lot of stuff that, like it was like you said earlier, Dave, that like it's a very complex document, and you can't like pick something out of one spot, and like you're not getting the whole story.
Right. Yeah. I think I got a nice kitschy one. How about if it's not a contradiction, it's a conversation. Like you've got authors that are in conversation with each other and are trying to figure out their own expression. I would say that, and unfortunately I have to leave early, my friends, and the two of you will be together. But the thing that I think is the modern, what is it? The biggest, that was a great, well-worded comment or question.
The distortion, the greatest distortion.
Yeah, is just a continuation of imperial Christianity. That's it. It's just building off of what's come before. So one of the things I've noticed is that a lot of modern mainline or new evangelicals are trying to dig back into some of the older interpretations, people who've been like heroes of the faith in the past. So there's like Aquinas or others. I'm like, don't do that, because these people are very problematic. Aquinas was very in support of slavery. Like there's just some really problematic figures throughout imperial Christianity history. And so I think it's just the biggest problem that I would agree with what Don said. And also it's just a continuation of imperial Christianity with a new flavor.
Yeah.
That appeals in some way, that makes some concessions, but is still just the same thing.
Like new Coke.
Yeah, right, exactly. Just not quite as good.
So, Dave, do you have one moment yet?
Yeah, sure.
One of the things you mentioned, Tana, about faith by works, or works versus faith, that I think is so important for modern Western Christians to understand. The gods of ancient times needed you to do these works in order to appease them, to arouse their interest, both literally and figuratively. And so there were these orgies, there were these heinous sexual abuse things that happened, but there were also all of these processes that were done in order to gain the favor of the gods. Paul is saying that Yahweh is not in need of that.
Yeah. exactly.
Instead, Yahweh just wants you to be faithful. And again, this is where we get messed up because we deliberately choose to translate faith as faith as opposed to faithful.
Right.
It's because of Jesus's faithfulness that we are saved. It is our own faithfulness that brings about our own safety. That if we live faithful to this idea that Israel has given us, we will not only find safety for ourselves, but we will create safety for others. That's really powerful. And so when Paul it's still action because Paul's talking about faithfulness.
Yeah.
Right. In fact, that's what James is so confounded by. He's like, faithfulness without action just doesn't exist.
Right.
Faithfulness is action. Like there is no such thing as faithfulness without action. So anyhow.
Agreed.
Amen to that, brother. 100%.
Hey, go take care of your sick kiddo.
I will. I love you all. I'll see you next week. Please don't talk about anything interesting without me.
We'll talk about you, so we won't.
Let's just pull up all of Dave's TikToks and react to them.
React to Dave's TikToks. We totally need to do that. We absolutely... Okay, that's got to go on the calendar. We need to have a reaction to Capozzi's TikToks.
I'll react as well with cringe. All right, love
that
you
would
all.
be amazing. Peace. I would love that so much. All right, bye, Dave.
We should totally do that.
What's that?
So we should totally do that.
So Tana, where do you want to go from here? Do you want to keep down that path or what?
I don't know what is going on with me today, but my brain empties very quickly because I had a thought and then I immediately lost it. I don't. It's like how I keep dropping things today. It's like it's dropping out of my head too. It had something to do with faith and works. I don't know. I guess maybe I'll put in a little plug for the podcast episode dropping tomorrow because that kind of goes with faith and works, about how faith is active and we can be sources of salvation and safety for people.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
So tune in.
I would definitely encourage folks to make sure you do check out that episode. What episode number is that? So people listening after the fact. What is it?
203.
Season 2, episode 3. Yeah, that's a wonderful discussion that we had.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites so far.
All right. Well, if you have any other questions, throw them in the chat. I do think it's important for us as we wait to see if there are any questions, is for us to really do a better job as Christians or people of faith when it comes to understanding Paul and talking about Paul to people. It would be similar to the fact that if you or I, Tana, wanted to speak to someone from another country, another ethnic background, particularly individuals who are not American, we would probably try to learn idioms. We would try to learn philosophical concepts to relate to our message. Even if we're teaching engineering or we're teaching marketing, it doesn't even matter what we're teaching or communicating. We want to use the language of the people that we're speaking to in order to cultivate understanding. Paul's doing that constantly. Paul is constantly using language of other people groups in order to leverage their understanding. And then what we have done, unfortunately, is we have taken those words and instead of seeing those as Paul using them as a bridge for communication that really needs some more accuracy, that needs some more understanding, we instead take it at face value and then just apply it whole, kit and caboodle.
Yeah. And I think One of the things about not studying the context of the Bible, like, do you remember when you were the associate pastor of a church, and
Pastor.
you were the ass pastor? I think you posted something on Facebook about how important it is to understand the context and the history. And there was actually somebody from the church that was basically like, the English translation NIV is the ultimate and it's perfect. And basically, like, the Bible was written in English almost.
They said the NIV, not the KJV?
I think they said NIV. I think it was like, it was very much like, and you were like, well, no, that's been translated from Greek and Hebrew. And they just were not understanding that concept that, you know, and I think I was thinking about that, like, one, if somebody's just sitting down and reading something in English, they might not think to do that. And I think that's partially a problem of education, like, in the church. Like, they should be growing up knowing, like, this is how you know. But the thing I've been thinking about too is that what you were saying about what it meant, what works meant in that one situation. So even translating it to the English is confusing because like, you have to understand. So I always think about how difficult it is to read Shakespeare. And that is English. I mean, it's a different form of English, but it's English.
But it's a closer relative than Greek or Hebrew.
Right. And I don't know anybody who's like, yeah, you can just read Shakespeare and gain a simple understanding and just read it at surface value and you know what's going on. Like, I don't know anybody who says that. And I always think about Romeo and Juliet at the beginning when they're Montagues and the Capulets are fighting, and I don't remember which character says it, but he's like, I bite my thumb at you. Like, which was, you know, a phrase for like, you're horrible. But we don't say that now. We're not like in an argument with somebody and go, I bite my thumb at you. And if you were just to take that like surface level English, you'd probably be like, are they like, are they doing?
And then running at them really fast.
You know? Yeah, it's just so. I honestly just have to believe. I believe there are some people who just, like, I know at different points in my life growing up, like, I didn't understand everything I didn't know that I needed to know in order to understand the Bible. But I honestly think there's just people who are disingenuous because they just want to hold on to power.
Well, part of what you're pointing to is a really important piece, right? So earlier interpretations, earliest translations into English of the Bible, right, would have included individuals like Luther, would have included individuals that were anti-Semites. So some of our first translations of the Bible from Hebrew, if you're talking about the Hebrew Bible, or Greek, if you're talking about the New Testament, and then there's some Aramaic in there as well. A lot of the folks that were doing the earliest translations were anti-Semitic, and had no Jewish background. And so their interpretations were as accurate as someone with those lenses could be. The problem is those became the standard upon which every translation was written afterwards.
Right.
And so after those translations, you couldn't sway very far from those translations because they had become beloved. They had become translations that were known entities, that people had memorized passages from them. And so they became these kind of a roadblock to accurate interpretation, because just like anything else, archaeology and the study of history has improved with technology. And we now can more easily study ancient texts than ever before. You know, this is kind of maybe a little bit of a silly comparison, but I think you and I were talking about this the other day. a software or a video game gets play tested, and it gets play tested by 1,000 people for 6 months. But then when they release it to the public, all of a sudden it has 1 million eyeballs on it. And within a few weeks, it already has had more runs done through that software or game than ever went through playtesting, which is why there's oftentimes a lot of bugs or a lot of problems found in those first few months, because all of a sudden it's open to a larger audience. The same thing's true with archaeology and biblical studies and ancient language studies, is that as technology has improved, we have a much larger number of people studying those things today, contributing their ideas, their creativity, their own unique lenses to reading those things. That has brought about a tremendous change, a tremendous amount of new ways of understanding things. Unfortunately, our translations of the Bible have not typically kept up with those.
Yeah.
Because, think about the Lord's Prayer. You probably know the KJV version, not the NRSV version, not the NIV version. You think about Psalm 23, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. That's KJV. That's not the NIV.
Right. Yeah.
And so we have anchored in our brain anti-Semitic, homophobic, right? That's what the KJV is, right? Patriarchal translation embedded in our brain, that if we gave you any other interpretation or any other translation of Psalm 23, most people would just reject it because it's not familiar.
Yeah. I have a question for you, but I don't want to step on. Are there any other questions to address?
There are no questions in the chat. We have left them
speechless. Yeah, they're just sitting there in awe. Diving blindly into resurrecting the glossy photo perception of his past. Yeah. And that's actually the question.
Shake that Polaroid.
That's well, and that's kind of the task we're trying to undergo here, right? Is find a good way forward for faith after it's kind of hit this point of just there's a name for this point that it's at, but of just being toxic. So my question is, because I'll be honest, I went through all this stuff the lazy way, and just like piggybacked on whatever you were doing, and just listened to you tell me what you were reading, and listen. I
thought you were gonna say listen to you tell me what to do or think, and I was like, oh,
no, but you were telling me what you're reading, when you were reading it, and I've listened to a lot of your sermons over the years.
I'm so sorry.
And we've done Bible studies together and like all that stuff. But where would you start if you wanted to learn about the context and history of that time?
Yeah, that book just doesn't exist.
Not one single book, but I'm assuming.
Yeah, I mean,
books.
as a single book, that is accessible, I would say. There are books out there, archaeology books, or books on Second Temple Judaism that are great. But even them, you would need to supplement with so many other things. And, oftentimes when I say something like that, I get from someone will be like, well, then write that book. But I'm not even sure how you would go about writing that book because it's like standing in the center of the galaxy and writing a comprehensive book on the galaxy, right?
You mean like the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy?
So you just write the number 42 down on a piece of paper, and that'll be the answer. So I do think that there is some complications. The one thing I would encourage folks to not do is go out and buy yet another study Bible. there might be two exceptions to that rule. The Jewish annotated New Testament is a great Bible that has a lot of references to where these ideas that are in the Gospels came from already from within Judaism, or demonstrate where Jesus maybe went awry from the common teachings of Judaism. And then one of the reasons I recommend that New Testament is because all the scholars that did the annotations are Jewish scholars, not Christian. So you're getting kind of a fresh perspective with no real agenda, I would argue, no real movement towards a certain way of thinking about Christendom. So that would be one. Then I believe, though I've never read it or seen it, I've seen it in the wild, but I've never actually picked it up and looked at it, there is an archaeology, a study Bible, archaeological study Bible, that my understanding is pretty good. The danger with study Bibles, in my opinion, real quick, the danger of study Bibles, in my opinion, is it's easy to start to confuse the writings of the commentator with the gospel, right? As if what they're writing is just as meaningful and profound as what's written in the text. And I would argue that it's someone's sermon notes that you're seeing. Take it with that kind of grain of salt.
Yeah. I also know you have a book called A Pinch of Incense. Doesn't that tell some of the...
A Pinch of Incense is wonderful. It's really a discussion about early Christianity and the complications that existed with Jewish Christians opposing Rome and also trying to find its way with Judaism and that conflict. It's wonderful, has great information, but is super rare and nearly impossible to find.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, yeah, that was kind of what I was wondering, because I realized at some point I was like, you know what? If somebody asked me that question, I wouldn't even know where to direct them.
I think that there's some interesting books that can kind of give you the taste of what happens when you understand archaeology or you understand context, that are really good. Let me see if I can find one. I know I lent it to someone, but it's something in the shadow.
I think I can picture that book, actually.
Let's see if I can just find it from. Whoa. I got a lot of erotica for typing in the shadow of. And then in the shadow of, with a side note of fictional historical fiction.
Those barn romances.
Yeah, but there's one book, and again, we'll get this in the show notes. But it's exceptional, and what it does is takes different characters from the Bible and also different characters from different times in the biblical writings. So it's not just biblical characters, though Paul, I believe, is one of the characters, but it's mostly focused on like the Hebrew prophets and people from around that age. And it just kind of tells, they're individual stories. Each chapter is a complete story, and it's just this cute little short story about this individual's life that gives you a ton of background on history. Are you muted?
Yeah, because I was moving something. I didn't want to make.
Because I could still hear you writing.
Really?
Yeah, you've moved a few times after you look like you clicked the button, and I could still hear you.
I wonder if it's coming through my headphones still.
Not sure. So, but we'll find that book title and get it to folks. But I highly recommend that book. I don't know how easy that one is to find either. I can't imagine it's that hard to find. But that's a great way to see if this interests you enough, right? Like you read it, there's not a huge commitment to it because each chapter is its individual story. But what it's going to do is give you a ton of background, a ton of what was going on in the everyday life of all those things, and also give you a lot of background of Judaism, ancient Judaism, etc. So it's really, really good.
Cool.
All right. Anything else, Tana?
Well, I think that's probably a good place to wrap up. Just again, wanted to note that I like all our podcasts, but the one dropping tomorrow is one of my favorites.
Yeah, mine too. Let's see if I can find this real quick. Man, it does not want to help me out here.
Well, we'll find it later and put it in the description.
All right. I suppose. Oh, hold on. I think I might have it. The Shadow of God, Stories from Early Judaism.
Okay. All right.
Wow, that is terrible.
It is, but that was I remember that was kind of like the cover I was picturing. So.
All right. Well, thanks, folks, for hanging out with us tonight. Appreciate it. I hope you have a beautiful week. Please come back Thursday night. Going to have a great conversation with Chris Sanchez. Really looking forward to that. Someone who I admire and look up to quite a bit. So I'm really excited to have him on. So we'll be on Thursday night, 8 o'clock Eastern. Check us out. Thanks, everybody. Now I have to figure out how to use. There we go. Now I'm going to say goodbye again. Bye again.
Hi.